I want you to take a second and just imagine that almost everything you've been taught about desire is backwards, like completely upside down.
Right.
Because we usually think of desire as this fixed identity, like a preference, or maybe some kind of biological destiny that you just wake up and discover one day, like a personality trait.
Yeah, like it's just hardwired into who you are.
Exactly. But what if it's none of those things? What if desire is actually an environmental survival skill?
I mean, it completely flips how we understand human connection, honestly. Because if we start looking at desire not as this, rigid category, but as a way the nervous system maps the physical world just to find safety, the implications are just, well, they're profound.
And that paradigm shift is exactly what we are exploring today in this deep dive. We're looking at this deeply personal, intensely analytical collection of essays and poetry called Desire as Trace, Not Truth.
It's such a brilliant text.
It really is. And our mission today is to essentially rebuild the entire architecture of human connection from the ground up. We are going to unpack how the body learns to detect safety before it even has words for it.
Right, before language.
Yeah. And how the meaning society assigns to our bodies often, well, violently clash with our actual lived sensations. And ultimately, how redefining relationships based on these concepts might just completely change the way you understand your own friendships and romances.
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking because the foundational argument here, it really strips away traditional psychology. It ignores standard romance narratives.
Totally.
The text suggests that for some people, desire doesn't begin with a conscious choice or a crush. It begins in absence, specifically the absence of mirroring.
Okay, let's unpack this because we need to break down what mirroring actually means in this context because it's super crucial.
Right, yeah.
Usually when a child experiences a strong emotion, a caregiver reflects it back. They provide this shared vocabulary. They'll say, you're crying, you're sad, but you're safe. And that caregiver's calm presence actually physically regulates the child's heart rate.
Exactly. It's co-regulation.
Right. But the author describes growing up without that consistent attunement.
And when that shared vocabulary is missing, the nervous system, it doesn't just shut down.
It adapts.
It's highly adaptive, yeah. It reorganizes itself. Without a person to consistently reflect safety, the body essentially learns to read the physical environment as its primary language.
Wow.
It tracks like the literal decibel level of a room, the cadence of footsteps in a hallway, the physical distance between bodies. So in this way, desire begins as detection.
Detection, that's such a specific word.
Right. It's not initially about who you want to date or, sleep with. It's about detecting the absolute faintest signals of coherence and regulation in what is basically an unpredictable space.
It's almost like a bat using echolocation or a submarine using sonar.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
The body is just constantly pinging the room, looking for a frequency that doesn't bounce back as danger. And the author talks about these first languages of contact, things like pressure, rhythm, and texture.
Yes.
Like how the specific weight of a hand on a shoulder can gather a scattered nervous system, or how a repetitive physical rhythm feels like a safe harbor.
And it's so frustrating because society usually looks at this behavior and just completely pathologizes it.
Oh, 100%. They slap a label on it, call it sensory seeking, and tell the person, you're being too much.
Right. But by framing it as a pathology, society misses the incredible mechanics of what is actually happening. I mean, this is the body teaching itself how not to disappear.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is, if we apply this to adult relationships, it entirely reframes the concept of attraction.
How so?
Well, in this architecture, attraction isn't about an object. It's not about a specific anatomical form or a look. Attraction is a brightening of the nervous system.
A brighten.
Yeah. It's that subtle half-degree shift, warmer when the body encounters a pattern of behavior or presence that allows it to stay intact without, constantly bracing for impact.
So think about a time you walked into a room or maybe met someone new, and before you even spoke a single word, the space either closed around you or it opened up just slightly.
Just enough to let you breathe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just enough to let you take a full breath. That physical shift, that is your sonar working. But, internal detection doesn't happen in a vacuum. Once your body starts mapping safety, it immediately crashes into society's pre-written scripts.
Yeah, it hits a wall.
Yeah.
And that collision is where the tension really escalates, particularly when we look at the clash between innate physical sensation and assigned gender.
Right.
The text explores this so deeply through the author's lived experience as an autistic trans person.
I am struggling with this a bit, though. I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, go for it.
If we lean heavily into this idea that desire and identity are just nervous system adaptations, doesn't that risk invalidating decades of trans medical history?
How do you mean?
Well, the dominant narrative usually centers gender dysphoria as a profound innate discomfort with the physical anatomy itself.
Right, right.
So how does the author reconcile focusing on social signals without minimizing physical dysphoria?
No, that's a really vital distinction to make. The author isn't trying to overwrite anyone else's medical reality at all. They are clarifying their own specific intersectional experience.
Gotcha.
For them, the primary distress wasn't always localized to the physical anatomy itself. The distress was the assignment.
The assignment.
Yeah, it was the clinical societal sentence of, you have this anatomy, therefore you will be read this way, and you are expected to desire accordingly.
Oh, wow.
The author describes gender less as this innate biological essence and more as a choreography. It's this really complex, rigid system of social signals, postures, and expectations that everyone else seemed to have just implicitly memorized.
Right.
And the author felt like they were constantly failing to perform it.
And the data surrounding neurodivergence provides massive context for this, actually. There is a specific, really fascinating data point highlighted here. Autistic people are roughly 6 times more likely to identify as trans than the neurotypical population.
Yeah, that statistic is wild.
6 times is a statistical mountain.
It really is. And to understand the why behind that overlap, the author hypothesizes that autistic people are just highly sensitive to constructed systems.
That makes total sense.
Right. A neurotypical brain often internalizes implicit social norms automatically. It just treats them as natural laws.
Like gravity.
Exactly. But an autistic brain often doesn't do that. They notice the literal scaffolding. They notice when a performance, like the choreography of traditional gender roles, is being passed off as an absolute, unquestionable truth.
They see the wires holding up the stage set.
Yeah.
The author brings up the writer Tala Brandeis to illustrate this beautifully. Stepping outside of an assigned dyster doesn't just reveal something deeply personal about the individual making the transition. It actually reveals the societal scaffolding holding the entire system together for everyone else.
Yeah, it exposes the whole thing.
It exposes how gender is enforced through repetition, punishment, and expectation, rather than just existing naturally.
And in this framework, transness emerges not as a delusion or a psychological confusion, which, is the hostile framing so often used against it.
Right.
It emerges as an accurate recognition. It's the highly attuned nervous system correctly identifying that the imposed societal narrative, this rigid grid laid over the body, does not align with the body's actual lived sensation.
So the body refuses the assignment because the assignment is fundamentally a misinterpretation of the sonar's signal.
Beautifully put. Yes.
So, okay, you realize the map you've been handed is broken. The grid doesn't work. How do you actually figure out what you do want?
Right, because you have to go somewhere.
Exactly. You can't just operate on a defensive sonar forever. Eventually, you want to move towards something. The text dives into this struggle by looking at the cultural archive of porn in the 80s and 90s, kind of searching for a script.
Yeah, trying to find a language.
But the way trans women were framed there was through this incredibly hostile, hypersexualized lens. It was all about deception or shock value or being this tragic conquest.
And that existing cultural grammar just completely failed to provide any resonance for the author.
It was awful.
Purely extractive. It didn't cause that nervous system brightening we talked about earlier to a system scanning for safety. It just felt like static and threat.
Meaning the author had to build a language of desire completely from scratch.
Yeah.
They had to piece it together from tiny, fleeting fragments observed in the club scene, literally just watching how 2 safe people interacted in the corner of a room.
Just taking notes on safety.
Yeah. A hand resting at the small of a back that asked a question instead of directing movement. A subtle shifting of physical pressure. A certain kind of exhaled laughter after a really intense moment. They mapped these micro moments of safe contact.
But here's the catch. Relying on pattern recognition for survival makes the nervous system uniquely vulnerable.
How so?
Well, if your desire is fundamentally tuned to detect signals of safety and attunement, you become incredibly susceptible to what the author calls counterfeit attunement.
Counterfeit attunement.
Yeah. This occurs when someone often referred to as a chaser in these dynamics learns how to mimic the initial signals of safety without possessing any actual capacity or intent to sustain that attunement.
It's like being handed a counterfeit $100 bill.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
It looks flawless from a distance. The colors match, the watermarks seem to be there, but the moment you rub it between your fingers, the texture of the paper is just wrong. Your body knows immediately, before your brain can even articulate why. The author gives this visceral example of interacting with a chaser in a club. At first, the person says all the right things, the eye contact feels grounded, but then you feel the interactions start to narrow.
And that narrowing is the key structural failure.
Right.
The person stops responding to the micro shifts in your breathing or your posture or your hesitation. They stop engaging with the actual human being in front of them and start steering the interaction forcefully toward their preformed fantasy.
They stop listening to the room.
Exactly. They begin assuming roles, desires, or boundaries that were never actually negotiated.
The sonar pings, and it hits a solid steel wall where there was supposed to be open water.
Yeah.
And you can't unknow that the wall is there. But when the author's body suddenly withdraws in these moments, society, and often the chaser themselves, labels it as an overreaction. They say, you're being too sensitive, you're ruining the mood over nothing.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is a profound form of gaslighting. The withdrawal is not an overreaction. It is a highly accurate read of the room. The nervous system has detected that the relational field is no longer being co-created. It is being managed for someone else's extraction.
Wow.
The other person isn't present for a shared experience. They are there to extract a specific performance from you to satisfy their script.
Okay, so if individual desire is this deeply complex, highly tuned radar for mutual safety, how on earth do we build sustainable relationships out of it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because the author takes these concepts and scales them way up, completely redesigning relationship architecture. They move entirely away from traditional monogamy, obviously, but they also step way beyond what we usually think of as standard polyamory.
The critique of standard polyamory in this text is really fascinating.
I love this part.
The author argues that much of contemporary polyamory still centers the traditional couple as the foundational unit. It's essentially just adding more discrete managed lines of connection. You have a primary partner, a secondary partner, and so on. It expands the volume of relationships, but it doesn't fundamentally change the underlying architecture of how people relate.
It's the same shape, just bigger.
Yes. What the author proposes instead is a concept called queer multiplicity.
And the analogy used to explain this is just brilliant. A single monogamous couple is like basic arithmetic. Traditional polyamory is just adding more math lines.
Right.
It's like watching a standard definition television, a 480i broadcast. You get the picture, you understand what's happening on screen, but it's compressed. It's missing gradients and shadows. But queer multiplicity, that is calculus. It is 8K native resolution.
I love that.
It abandons the crude question of who is officially dating whom. Instead, it asks you to track the fluid dynamics of a room. Where is the attention moving? Where is the pressure accumulating? Who is subtly making someone else feel more grounded?
It shifts the entire focus from the object of desire to the field of desire.
Yes.
We see this vividly in the text examples of the grope room and the playroom in queer club spaces. This is the concept of desire without object in action.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. So the author observes two queer bottoms negotiating touch. In a traditional framing, there is no predefined cultural choreography for that interaction. There's no fixed top or bottom script for them to default to.
They literally have to feel their way through it in real time.
Exactly. They are communicating through touch, asking, can I stay present with you? Rather than demanding, what role are you playing for me?
Wow.
The old rigid binaries, hetero, queer, top, bottom, they start to completely blur because they only describe surface aesthetics. They don't describe the actual nervous system regulation happening underneath the skin.
A participant in that space feels the deep, mutual regulation of the nervous system, whereas an outside spectator only sees a confusing configuration of bodies. The priority is the shared warmth, not the label. But here's where it gets really interesting. I hear the beauty in that, I really do. But I have to ask, if everything is this fluid, if it's all about shifting fields of attention and pressure without any fixed labels or exclusivity, doesn't this just become incredibly chaotic?
It sounds like it would, right?
Yeah. Doesn't this total lack of exclusivity mean a massive lack of stability? It sounds exhausting, honestly, to never have a locked-in harbor.
That fear of chaos is the assumption most of us make, for sure, because we have been heavily conditioned to believe that exclusivity is the only reliable source of safety.
Right.
But the author introduces a beautiful stabilizing concept to counter this: sensual residue.
Sensual residue.
Yeah. In this 8K resolution architecture, friendship is the base state of existence. Friendship is the foundational infrastructure of the community. It is not a waiting room for romance,
Right.
and it is certainly not a consolation prize when romance fails.
Contrast that with standard cis-heteromonogamy, where romance usually acts like a massive gravitational collapse.
Oh, perfectly said.
Two people pair off, and the whole surrounding ecosystem thins out. Friends disappear into their own domestic silos, platonic touch becomes artificially scarce, and all of a person's emotional regulation gets concentrated onto one single romantic bond.
Which is incredibly
Well, it's
fragile.
terrifyingly fragile.
It actually concentrates the risk.
Yeah.
If that one central romantic bond destabilizes or breaks, the individual is left in a void, completely untethered.
Right.
But in the architecture of queer multiplicity, the broader relational web remains robust and intact. Care, platonic touch, eroticism, and deep emotional support circulate fluidly through the network without requiring ownership or exclusivity.
Meaning the shock absorption is built into the community.
Exactly.
If an intense romantic connection shifts or fades, the person isn't abandoned. The shock of that transition is absorbed by the broader field. The sensual residue, the bodily memory of warmth, of being met, of deep platonic attunement, it lingers in the friendships around them. The nervous system is continuously supported, even in the midst of romantic grief.
We've traced a pretty remarkable journey here today.
We really have.
We've moved from the simplistic idea of desire as a fixed identity to understanding it as a highly sensitive radar for physical and emotional safety.
Right.
And we've seen how trusting that radar can guide us toward a completely different, infinitely more expansive ethic for how human beings can care for one another.
And it is so important to emphasize the author's ultimate intention from the final chapter here. This entire collection of essays, this deeply analytical framework, it is not a manifesto.
No, not at all.
It is not a rule book trying to tell everyone that traditional relationships are inherently bad or wrong.
No, it functions entirely as a recognition system.
Right.
It is putting out a very specific frequency into the world to find kin. It's designed to reach the people whose bodies intuitively understand this complex architecture without needing it constantly translated or justified.
Yeah.
Because in this expanded field, safety isn't the impossible, naive promise that a rupture or a heartbreak will never occur. Safety is the deep, settled knowledge in your bones that the people around you possess the vocabulary and the willingness to repair it when it does.
So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? Before we wrap up, I want you to take these concepts of sonar, mirroring, and attunement and apply them to something we do every single day: our relationship with technology.
Oh, that's a great point.
If desire, safety, and human connection are fundamentally based on these physical micro-attunements, the subtle shifts in breathing, the pressure of a hand, the physical warmth of a room, what happens to our nervous systems when we spend 80% of our social lives negotiating connections through flat screens and text messages?
We're missing so much data.
Exactly. When we strip away all the physical data our bodies evolved to track, are we essentially starving our sonar? Just something to think about next time you reach for your phone to feel connected.